My name is Madison Foster. I'm 32, and I've spent most of my adult life quietly picking up the financial pieces for my family. Groceries, rent shortfalls, emergency bills that always seem to fall on me. So, when my mom invited me to a family dinner last week with a smiley face emoji, no less, I let myself believe it might be something different. A thank you, maybe. A moment of peace. Instead, I walked into the same kitchen I grew up in and realized everyone else already knew what the night was really about. Drop a comment if you've ever shown up hoping for love and walked out feeling used. Because what happened next? It didn't just open old wounds. It showed me the stories we tell ourselves about family, about duty, about love can be the very lies holding us hostage. Let me tell you what really happened that night. I stared at my phone longer than I cared to admit. The message had come through late afternoon. Mom. Dinner at the house this Friday. 7 sharp, everyone's coming. No extra words. No apology. Just the kind of overly casual tone my mom used when she wanted to control the emotional temperature in the room. It was the emoji that did it for me, like a peace offering wrapped in sugar and silence. I sat at my kitchen table, thumb hovering over the reply button. The apartment was quiet, except for the slow tick of the wall clock. I hadn't eaten dinner, couldn't think past the pit in my stomach. Connor walked in from the garage, wiping grease off his hands with an old t-shirt. You're still looking at that text like it's about to bite you. I exhaled. It might. He leaned against the counter, reading me the way only he could. Calm, grounded. He didn't press. She hasn't asked me to dinner in months, I said. Last time I saw her was at the grocery store, and she pretended not to recognize me until the cashier said my name. Connor didn't flinch. And now she's inviting you to a sit-down? Not just me. Everyone, she says. I looked up. Which means Trevor, probably a few cousins, maybe her bridge club friend Rachel, anyone she can control the narrative around. He crossed the kitchen, resting a hand on my shoulder. You don't owe her attendance. I know. I paused. But if I don't show up, I'm the one with something to hide. You know how this town works. Connor nodded slowly. I also know how your mom works. We both fell quiet. I picked up the phone again, thumb still hovering. I hadn't responded yet, but I had scrolled up past dozens of older messages from her. Most were transactional. Can you send $200 until next Tuesday? Jason's meds aren't covered. Don't tell your brother, but I need help with the electric. Not once had she said thank you. But back then, I hadn't needed it. I just wanted her to be okay. I wanted to matter. Connor broke the silence again. You know she came by the school last week? I looked up, eyebrows raised. She what? She didn't come inside. Caught me on my way out. Said she was trying to reconnect with Maddie and asked if I had your new address. Claimed she lost it. He frowned. Which is odd, considering she's mailed you holiday cards every year. My chest tightened. So she's staging something. Connor didn't answer. He didn't need to. I tapped the back of my phone against the table twice, then unlocked it. At that exact moment, another message came in, this one from Trevor. Trevor. Glad you're finally making things right with Mom. See you Friday. He blinked. Connor saw my face change. What? I showed him the screen. He let out a low whistle. She's already told them her version. I felt my face flush. I haven't spoken to her about anything, not a word about money, not even the unpaid stuff from last year. I know you didn't, he said gently. She's building a case before you ever walk through the door. I swallowed hard. The familiar tightness returned to my throat. That feeling of being 2 steps behind in a story I was the one financing. I just wanted to help, I whispered. That was the whole point. I didn't ask for praise. I just didn't expect to be painted as the problem. Connor crouched next to my chair and met my eyes. Then don't let them control the script. I hesitated. The silence between us felt louder than before. Maybe part of me wanted to show up. To see if maybe, just maybe, it really was dinner. Maybe she'd make something homemade like when we were kids, fried pork chops, boxed mashed potatoes, those cheap biscuits she always overbaked. Maybe it would feel like a family again. But the more likely scenario? I'd walk in, and the walls would close in before dessert. Still, I knew what I had to do. I opened the message thread with my mom, typed out 2 words, "I'll come," then hit send. The moment it was done, I felt my pulse slow. Not relief, just certainty. Whatever was coming, I wouldn't hide from it. Connor stood and reached for the kettle. "Tea?" "Yeah," I murmured. "Chamomile." As the water started to boil, I looked out the kitchen window. The street was quiet, the porch light flickering like always. I could already hear my mom's voice in my head, rehearsed and sticky sweet. "Maddie, we're just worried about you. We thought it was time to talk, honestly. You've taken a lot from this family over the years. It's time to make things right." I gripped the edge of the table and took a breath. No matter what happened Friday night, I wasn't going to let her rewrite my truth. I pulled up in front of my mother's house 5 minutes early and immediately regretted it. The porch light was already on, warm and welcoming in the way small-town porches pretend to be. Through the front window, I could see silhouettes moving, slow pacing, someone adjusting silverware, a hand brushing hair flat. From the outside, it looked like any other family dinner. But I knew better. This house had never been a place of comfort. Not for me. Still, I killed the engine and sat for a second, just breathing. My hands were shaking, so I tucked them under my thighs and stared at the screen door. It was the same one from my childhood, chipped paint, one corner of the mesh frayed. I used to press my finger through it when I was little, watching bugs crawl by while I waited for Mom to stop yelling on the phone. Now, I was 32 and walking back into that same house by choice. The front door creaked open before I could knock. And there she was. Madison. My mom's voice was all syrup and sunshine. "You're right on time, honey. Come in, come in." I stepped into the house, the smell hitting me instantly. Fried onions, hairspray, and old carpet. It was a smell I hadn't missed, but one I recognized in my bones. She leaned in for a hug, cold arms wrapping around me like wires. "You look so grown up," she said, stepping back to look me over like she was assessing damage. "Did you cut your hair?" I didn't answer. I just smiled politely and stepped out of my boots. The living room was full. Trevor was on the couch, drink in hand, nodding along to some story from Rachel, Mom's bridge club friend. Rachel looked up when she saw me and gave a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. On the far side of the room, my cousin Derek sat beside his wife, both whispering with that overly interested energy people have when they think they're about to witness something. It felt staged. Too neat. Too cheerful. I followed Mom into the dining room, and that's when I saw it. The table was set for 10. Not 5, 10. Matching plates, linen napkins, wine glasses. Mom didn't even drink wine unless she was trying to impress someone. She had lit the good candles, the ones from the church fundraiser she'd been hoarding for years. She was performing. "Maddie, would you mind helping me with the cornbread?" she asked sweetly. I nodded and followed her into the kitchen, where she immediately handed me the cast-iron skillet, heavy and already cooled too long. "It's dry," I said before I could stop myself. She smiled. "Well, nothing you can't fix with some butter." That was Mom in a sentence. "Burn it, serve it anyway, blame you for how it's received." I placed the skillet on the table and glanced around. Everyone was in their places. No one made eye contact for long. Rachel adjusted her bracelet. Derek coughed into his fist. Trevor grinned at his drink like it had told him a joke. I took the only open seat across from Mom. She lifted her glass. "Let's say grace." The prayer was short, generic, like something she'd copied off a napkin. Then came the small talk. And the toasts. "To family," Derek offered, raising his glass. "To second chances," Rachel added. Then Trevor stood, and my stomach sank. "To the real MVP of this family," he said, gesturing to Mom, "for holding us together through thick and thin." Everyone clapped. Even I did, weakly. I looked at Trevor. He didn't glance my way. Mom beamed like she'd just won a prize. Oh, now, I don't deserve all that. But she soaked it in anyway. My eyes wandered down the table, over the placemats, the wine stains, the mismatched silverware. Then they landed on something that made my breath catch. A manila folder, tucked halfway under her purse, just barely visible. Written on the top corner, in my own handwriting. Loan ledger, 2016 to 2023. I froze. I'd written that. Years ago. I used to keep track of everything I gave her just to stay organized. Gas money. Rent help. Groceries. It wasn't a contract, just a record. Something to remind me I hadn't imagined all the giving. I hadn't seen it in years. I thought I'd lost it. And now it was sitting on her table like an exhibit. I didn't touch it. I didn't say a word. But I felt heat climb the back of my neck. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Was she going to use it? Twist it. Mom cleared her throat and stood slowly, holding her glass with both hands. There's something I'd like to clear up tonight, she said, looking straight at me. Everyone turned toward her, forks pausing midair. I didn't move. I just stared at that folder. And braced for whatever was coming next. There's something I'd like to clear up tonight, my mother said, lifting her glass like it was a microphone. She didn't look at me directly, which told me everything. The table went quiet, except for the soft clink of forks being set down. Even Rachel, who normally couldn't stay silent longer than 10 seconds, folded her napkin and waited. I sat there, frozen in that tiny chair I'd outgrown 20 years ago, my eyes locked on the manila folder under Mom's purse. My name in my own handwriting stared back at me. Loan ledger, 2016 to 2023. A record I kept out of necessity. Out of love. Now it was a weapon. I know this has been a hard couple of years for all of us, Mom began, her voice the perfect blend of motherly concern and social grace. Lord knows I've done what I could to keep this family afloat, sometimes, quietly. She paused, letting the word quietly hang in the air like incense. Trevor leaned back in his chair and nodded solemnly, as if she'd just testified to something sacred. And some people, she continued, her tone softening into a practiced tremble. Some people in this family have forgotten that support goes both ways. There it was. The first jab. Rachel made a little sound, like a sympathetic murmur. I swallowed hard and glanced down at my lap. My hands were still, but every muscle in my body was tight. I could feel my teeth pressing together. Mom went on, smiling gently like she was delivering bedtime news. Now, I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. God knows that's not my heart. That was always her disclaimer before saying something humiliating. That's not my heart. Translation. I'm about to light a match, and you better smile while I do it. But I do think, she said, her eyes finally landing on me. It's time we stop pretending that help hasn't gone both ways. Silence. I didn't move. Mom reached down and pulled the folder into view. My breath caught. I came across some old paperwork, recent records, really, things I kept tucked away, just in case. She opened the folder like she was reading scripture. 2016, $350 for rent, she read aloud. 2017, another $600. 2018, 2 separate amounts in for groceries, one for that time you said your car needed tires. Laughter. Light, uncertain. Someone exhaled sharply through their nose. I sat forward slightly. Those were payments I gave you, I said quietly. I tracked them for taxes. For my own bookkeeping. Mom smiled, blinking like I'd said something cute but incorrect. Honey, you gave them to me, sure, but only after I covered you all those years before. You don't remember that. My throat tightened. I was 18. She waved her hand like she was brushing away dust. Doesn't matter. Family keeps tabs because family cares. Trevor cleared his throat. I mean, to be fair, Maddie's always had a little trouble landing on her feet. I mean, the mental health stuff, the jobs you left. My stomach dropped. I turned to him. You mean the year I worked 2 jobs while taking night classes and paid off your payday loan? He looked away. Rachel picked up her wine glass. No one's blaming you, Maddie. We just want clarity. Mom's been carrying this weight for a while. A strange sound escaped my mouth. Almost a laugh. Clarity. That's what this was called now. I looked at the folder again, then back at Mom. Did you tell everyone I was dependent on you? She pressed her lips together and gave the world's slowest nod. I told the truth. You needed help, and I gave it. I don't want people thinking I didn't do everything I could. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about me owing her anything. It was about her protecting her image. She wanted credit for what she never actually gave. And she couldn't stand the idea that I'd built a life without her at the center of it. A flash of memory came over me, her yelling on the phone with a creditor, me in the next room writing a check I couldn't afford to stop the electric from being shut off. She'd taken the check, said thank you once, then the next day told her friend she was the one bailing me out. History rewrites itself fast when no one else keeps the receipts. I took a deep breath. You're twisting things, Mom. I am mess. She raised her eyebrows in mock surprise. Now, why would I do that? Because you need a villain to stay the victim. Her face twitched. Just for a second. But I saw it. Trevor shifted in his seat. Come on, Maddie. Nobody's attacking you. I looked at him, really looked at him. Then what is this? I gestured to the folder. What is this dinner? What is this room full of people I barely hear from suddenly nodding like they've been given a script? I didn't wait for an answer. I stood up slowly, letting my napkin drop to the plate like a white flag I never actually waved. You really want to do this? I said. My voice was low. Calm. You want to play this out in front of everyone? Nobody moved. Mom stared at me like I'd just interrupted her big finale. And maybe I had. No one answered me. I stood there, my voice still echoing slightly in the silence. 10 seconds passed. Maybe more. The kind of silence that doesn't fall naturally, it's chosen. Protected. Trevor finally looked up, his mouth half open like he was searching for neutral ground. It's not like that, Maddie. I turned to him. Then what is it like? He hesitated. We're just saying. If Mom's been carrying this stuff on her own, maybe you could have communicated better. My chest tightened. Aunt June, my mom's older sister, was the last person I expected to speak. She had always been the buffer in our family. The one who gave me books on scholarships and snuck me $20 bills when Mom's lessons went too far. Now she looked at me with that same expression people wear when they're trying to scold kindly. I wish you'd just pay her back, sweetie, she said. Not for her, for you, so you can both move on. He blinked. My throat went dry. Pay her back? I said. You think I owe her? She gave a small, tight nod. That's what all this is about, isn't it? My voice dropped lower. What I gave was never a loan. I didn't ask for a dime back. Ever. That's not what she told us. Rachel chimed in, stirring her wine with a bent cocktail straw. And you know she's not a liar. I looked at her, really looked. The flawless hair, the cloying perfume, the sympathetic tilt of her head. Rachel had always played both sides. Always careful to stay on the winning team. I turned back to my mom. Did you tell them I asked for repayment? Mom's eyes didn't flinch. I told them I kept track. And I did. You're not the only one who can make a spreadsheet. The room chuckled. Not loud, but enough. I wanted to throw the chair. I wanted to scream. But what I did instead was worse. I sat back down. Because something in me needed them to see how ridiculous this was, me, surrounded by the people I'd helped, being painted as the one who'd taken too much. I laid my palms flat on the table. You want the ledger? Let's read it. Mom raised her eyebrows. Excuse me? I reached forward and pulled the folder toward me. My hands weren't shaking now. I was too angry for that. November 2017, I read. $500 for rent after you called crying because the heater went out. She sniffed. February 2019. $220 your car insurance lapsed. You asked me not to tell Trevor. I flipped the page. July 2020. $1,200 to help cover the house note after Trevor lost his job and you said, quote, "I'll pay you back when taxes come in." Spoiler, you didn't. Rachel's eyes widened slightly. Trevor turned red. "I never saw that sheet," he muttered. "No, you wouldn't have," I said. "Because I wasn't keeping it for you. I kept it for me. So I could remember that I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't just imagining all the ways I tried to keep this family afloat while everyone acted like I was dragging us down." A breath caught in my chest. I looked up again, my voice quieter now. But I guess none of that matters if the story plays better the other way. Mom tilted her head, expression blank. "You've always had a flair for drama, Maddie." There it was. The final pivot. I stood again, slower this time, the folder still in my hand. "Keep the stories. I'm done defending myself in a house full of people who already made up their minds." Trevor looked like he wanted to say something but didn't. He just stared at his plate. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair. As I pulled it over my shoulders, Aunt June said softly, "You don't have to leave like this." I turned to her, forcing a small smile. "There's no other way to leave, June." I made it to the door before my mom spoke again. "She always runs when it gets real," she said. Louder this time. For the audience. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. The screen door creaked just like it used to, and the porch air hit me like a slap. Cool, quiet, real. I stepped out, the folder tucked against my side like something fragile. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I turned around and looked back. Through the window, I saw them, all of them. Still at the table. Plates still half full. Mouths moving. Heads shaking. Mom already recentering herself in the spotlight. I could have gone back in. I could have fought harder. But for what? To win back people who never listened in the first place? I walked to my car without saying a word. Slid into the driver's seat. Shut the door. The sound of it closing was louder than anything said inside. I rested my hands on the steering wheel. The folder sat in my lap. Proof of everything I gave. To a family that would never see it. And in that moment, I realized something. It's not running. If you're walking away from a trap. I didn't cry when I got home. I thought I would. Thought I should. But instead, I walked straight to my desk, pulled out the bottom drawer, and took out the black accordion folder I hadn't opened in years. The tabs were still labeled in my handwriting: medical, utilities, taxes, and then, near the back, Mom. That label used to make me feel proud. Now it made my stomach turn. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the soft creak of my desk chair as I sat down. I opened the folder and began flipping through. Receipts. Bank transfers. Screenshots of Venmo messages. Her voice played in my head with each one. "Can you just send it to my checking this time? Don't tell Trevor, but I'm in a bind. Once I sell that antique table, I'll pay you back." She never did. Half an hour passed before I even realized I hadn't moved. My fingers hovered over a birthday card I'd nearly tossed a dozen times before. It was from her. The handwriting was sharp and small. Inside was a line that read, "Thank you for covering the mortgage again. You're always my safety net. Love you." Safety net. That word felt different now. Just then, a knock at the door startled me. 3 short taps. I stood up, heart pounding slightly, and peeked through the peephole. It was Joylene. I opened the door without saying anything. She gave me that familiar nod, small, respectful. "Thought you might need some company. I brought pie." I stepped aside, letting her in. She wore her usual soft denim jacket and carried a tinfoil-wrapped bundle like it held state secrets. We sat at the table, and I watched her place the pie down carefully. "Peach," she said. "Didn't know what kind of bitter taste you had in your mouth, so I figured I'd balance it out." I laughed once, softly. "Smart." She looked at me closely. "You okay?" "Number." I paused. "But I'm not broken." Joylene nodded, like she was proud of that answer. "You want to talk about it?" she asked. I motioned to the folder. That's what I've got to say. She pulled her reading glasses from her jacket pocket and leaned in. Let's see it then. We went through each page, slowly. She didn't speak much, just nodded. Took it in. Halfway through, she picked up a printout of a transfer from my business account, $450 labeled, Mom, bridge dues plus groceries. That was during COVID, I said. She said she couldn't leave the house. I Instacarted everything. She posted on Facebook later that Rachel had saved the day. Joylene looked at me. You been keeping score? I met her eyes. I was keeping sanity. She nodded again. Sometimes they're the same thing. I exhaled, leaning back. I should have seen it coming. I mean, she used my own ledger against me. That's the thing about manipulators, Joylene said. They don't use lies. They use your truth, out of order and out of context. I rubbed my temples. Rachel said she's not a liar. And they all believed it. Sweetheart, Joylene said gently. Liars don't have to fabricate. They just have to frame. That sat with me for a while. Heavy but clean. Then she added, like it was an afterthought, you know what else folks are saying around town? I looked up. She sighed. That you once stole from her. When you were 19, savings account, apparently. My jaw tensed. What? Said she found a withdrawal missing and you were the only one who had the key to her lockbox. Oh. I laughed this one bitter and fast. She gave me that key when she went to Branson for 3 days and asked me to water her plants. I didn't even know she kept cash in there. Joylene didn't push. She just listened. I stared at the papers again, suddenly aware that they weren't enough. Not to people who wanted a story that made them feel better. Doesn't matter, I said. No one will believe me over her. I will. That stopped me. She reached into her purse and pulled out a slim folder of her own. It was an old church bulletin, folded around something thicker. I didn't mean to find this, she said. Back when we were going through donations at the women's ministry, your mom submitted paperwork for emergency support, claimed you were one of her financial dependents. I blinked. What? She listed your name and your address, said you were living with her, unemployed, that she was covering your expenses. But I wasn't even living in the state then. Joylene handed me the bulletin and the attached copy of the aid form. Her handwriting was on the corner. A small note. Keep this for later. I stared at it, my throat tightening. I wanted to feel angry. But what I felt was smaller than that. A kind of grief that didn't cry out loud, just sat heavy in your chest and waited. She's always been building a case, I whispered. Joylene put her hand over mine. You don't have to fight it her way, she said. But you do have to decide how much longer you're gonna bleed for someone else's story. I looked at the table. The folder, the card, the copy of that form. And suddenly I saw it not as a burden, but as a timeline. One that didn't just tell the truth, it proved it. The next morning, I didn't sleep in. I couldn't. Something had shifted the night before right there in my tiny apartment, across from Joylene and that damn peach pie. For years, I thought keeping records was just a habit. Something I did because I was a bookkeeper and that's how I made sense of the world. But sitting in front of those folders again, I realized they weren't just numbers. They were a map of how much I'd given. And how much I'd lost trying to hold everyone else up. I made coffee, pulled my hair into a loose braid, and sat back down at the kitchen table. The sun was just starting to come through the blinds, slicing the room into gold and shadow. I opened the next file, MISC. Household, and started sorting. About 30 minutes in, I found it. Tucked between an old phone bill and a car repair estimate. A pawnshop receipt. I didn't remember keeping it, but the name at the top made my stomach turn. Quick cash, Tulsa Boulevard. Date: May 13, 2022. Item: gold locket with birthstone. Customer: Doreen Foster. I stared at the words, trying to make them make sense. I'd given her that locket the previous Mother's Day. Hand-picked the garnet stone. Had it engraved inside. To the woman who taught me grit. She wore it to brunch the next day. Swore it was the most thoughtful gift anyone had given her. And then, Less than a week later, she pawned it. My jaw tightened as I picked up the slip. It still had the price printed in cheap red ink, $42. $42. That's what my affection was worth. I pressed the paper flat on the table and sat back. I couldn't feel anything yet, not anger, not sadness. Just a numbness, like my body was buffering before it let the emotion in. My phone buzzed across the counter. Trevor. One new voicemail. I didn't answer. I let it roll into the inbox, then pressed play. Hey, so, I don't know what Mom told you after you left, but she's saying you made a scene and tried to start a fight. Aunt June's backing her. Rachel too. I didn't say anything, okay? Just call me if you want to talk. Or not. There was a long pause before he added, I hope you don't go around making this uglier than it needs to be. Then it cut off. I stared at the screen for a second. Then I opened my voice memos app. I hadn't touched it in years, but I'd once used it to record notes during freelance projects, tax reminders, billable hours. As I scrolled through, one file caught my eye. The 2nd of March, front porch. I tapped play. There was wind in the background, the creak of a chair. Then Mom's voice, clear as day. Maddie, I'm just saying you help because you can. Don't act like you're doing me a favor when I raised you with nothing. You think I didn't cover for you when you dropped out that semester. I told people you were sick so you didn't look weak. Silence. Then my voice, small. I never asked you to lie. Then her again. Well, that's what mothers do. They build a version that doesn't embarrass the family. And in return, you pick up the slack when we need it. That's how we balance. I paused the audio. That line sat heavy. They build a version that doesn't embarrass the family. How? I opened another tab on my laptop, found my online banking history, and began clicking through archived statements. There it was again and again. Payments from me to Hersom with labels, others not. Then I spotted a pattern. Several deposits made to an account titled Foster Home Loan Fund. It wasn't an actual business or shared fund. Just a nickname Doreen used when she didn't want Trevor or anyone else asking questions. I remembered now. She once told me. It sounds more official that way, easier to track. I had believed her. For years, I thought I was helping. But she was building a facedione where she looked like the provider while quietly draining my support to hold it up. I clicked print on every relevant record. Laid each one on the table in chronological order. Labeled them by year, by event, by category. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. And reclaiming the version of the story I'd lived but never been allowed to tell. I stood, went to the hallway closet, and pulled out a brand new file box I'd bought months ago for client work. It had never been used. I opened the lid, placed the records inside with care, and stuck a label on the outside. Truth. Foster family account. All caps. I stared at it for a long moment. This was my ledger now. Not for taxes. Not for pity. For clarity. Because the next time someone asked what happened, I wasn't going to explain myself with stories. I'd let the numbers speak for me. It started with a text from a girl I barely spoke to anymore. Cassidy, cousin. Hey, Mom says Aunt Dee's going to the courthouse this week. Something about filing to protect her public standing. You okay? Public standing. It sounded like something a senator would say. Not a woman who once tried to return a used coffee maker to Walmart without the receipt. I sat on my couch, staring at the screen, the sunlight stretching across the rug like nothing was wrong. A slow heat started rising behind my ribcage. Not panic. Not even anger, exactly. Just confirmation. She was going to escalate. I pulled up the county clerk's website. Searched public intent to file notices. There it was. Foster, Doreen A. Statement of character defense, Exhibit A pending. No details. Just a line that something would be submitted later in the week, referencing community harm via misinformation and undue financial stress. I couldn't help it, I laughed. A dry, humorless sound that filled the room and went nowhere. Connor wasn't home yet. He texted earlier from the auto shop, saying his day was running long. Part of me wanted to wait and tell him in person. The other part knew if I didn't start moving now, I'd collapse under the weight of my own inaction. So I stood, pulled the Truth Foster family account folder from the bookshelf, Saturday back at the table, and opened my laptop. Time to organize. Not just for me. For whatever came next. 20 minutes into compiling the timeline, another message buzzed in. Rachel, Bridge Club, Rachel. A little birdie says you're trying to bankrupt your mother. If this isn't a misunderstanding, I'd recommend you talk to her before the town hears one side. I didn't respond. The irony was unbearable. She was warning me to fix the story, while reinforcing the version I never told. I picked up my phone and called Joylene. She answered on the first ring. I heard. And if sure. Of course she had. Courthouse? I asked. Public filing, no legal merit, it's just performance. But it plants seeds. Seeds I can't afford to let grow, I said. There was a pause. Then her voice dropped a note. There's more. I waited. She filed for community hardship assistance 3 years ago. Listed you again as a dependent, said you were unemployed, living in her home, and that she covered your medical needs. Numa. I closed my eyes. My name's been used for 3 different aid requests, I said quietly. 2 of which I knew nothing about. She signed that last one under penalty of perjury, Joylene added. Just so you know. I took a breath. Held it. Let it out slow. Do I escalate? Joylene didn't answer right away. I heard her shuffling papers. I think, she said carefully, you document, you verify, you prepare. And when it comes time to speak, whether that's legal or emotional, you speak once, and you do it clean. I nodded. Then remembered she couldn't see me. I'm tired, Joylene. I know. That's why you speak from solid ground. Not just emotion. She wins if you lose your footing. We hung up, and I sat there a moment longer. What did solid ground even feel like? I reached for an envelope I hadn't touched yet. It was from my bankin' annual notice I'd shoved aside weeks ago. Inside was a breakdown of annual transfers, charitable donations, gifted funds, standard stuff. But one section caught my eye. Total funds disbursed to personal payees, non-invoiced. $16,840.44. $16,840. Gone. Over the last 7 years. Rent. Groceries. Cash withdrawals at Christmas. Utility payments I'd quietly made from my own account when she said the lights were going off and Trevor was having a hard time again. I'd never totaled it up before. And now I couldn't unsee it. 16 grand. Just to be called a leech in front of a table full of people who couldn't remember the last time they paid their own tab. I scanned the pages, added them to the folder. Then opened a blank document on my computer. The title line blinked back at me. Subject. Clarification regarding financial support, foster household. But I didn't write anything else yet. I wasn't sure if I'd ever send it. What I did next felt more important anyway. I stood, grabbed the file box, and walked it to my hallway closet. I slid it behind the vacuum, into the corner, and closed the door. Because I knew now. She had always had a backup plan. But so did I. And mine didn't need an audience. I hadn't planned to see him that day. But after staring at the folder in my closet for 10 straight minutes, I realized there was one thing still gnawing at me. Trevor. He hadn't called since the dinner. Not even a text. Just that passive voicemail the morning after. The kind that sounds concerned if you play it on low volume, but means nothing if you turn it up. So I drove over. His place was only 15 minutes away, tucked behind the high school in one of those weathered duplexes with satellite dishes and sagging porch steps. I parked, turned the ignition off, and sat there for a few seconds. I hadn't visited in over a year. Not since I brought his oldest a backpack and some new sneakers before school started. I'd left them on the porch. No thank you ever came. But his wife posted a Facebook story that night with the caption, Blessed beyond words. I guess silence runs in the family. I got out and walked up the short path. The yard was half mowed, patches of dry grass clinging to clumps of green. I knocked. Trevor opened the door wearing a faded t-shirt and pajama pants, even though it was almost noon. When he saw me, he rubbed the back of his neck. Didn't expect to what's up. I didn't answer. Just held up the envelope in my hand. Got a minute? He hesitated, then stepped back. Yeah, come in. The house smelled like microwaved pizza and baby wipes. Something cartoonish played on the television, volume too high for the size of the room. I followed him to the kitchen, where he motioned to a chair at the small table. I sat. Laid the envelope down between us. I want to ask you something, I said. And I'd like a straight answer. Trevor didn't sit right away. He poured himself a glass of soda, drank half of it standing, then finally took the chair across from me. Did you know Mom's been using my name to file support claims? Told people I was living with her, unemployed, that she was covering my medical expenses. His face shifted, just barely. He looked down at the table. She said something like that once, but I didn't really think. She said it more than once. Signed it, submitted it. And she's about to file a public statement at the courthouse this week to defend her character. Trevor took a breath. Look, Maddie. I didn't ask her to do any of that. But you benefited from it. That stopped him. I pulled a printout from the envelope and slid it across the table. Remember this? I asked. He glanced at it. His eyes narrowed. That's the dental bill, he muttered. For Logan's molars. I paid that, I said. $426. You said insurance wouldn't cover it and Mom told you I'd want to help. So I did. He pushed the paper back toward me. I didn't force you. No, I said. But you also didn't tell the truth when she flipped the story and made it sound like you were covering for me. He looked away. I felt something crack, not loudly, just enough to let in the light. You told me once, I said quietly, that you were grateful I kept things private. That it wasn't anyone's business how the money moved. But when Mom stood there calling me a burden, you clapped. I didn't know what to do, okay? He snapped. I was caught in the middle. I leaned in. You weren't caught, Trevor. You were quiet, that's different. He exhaled. You know how she gets. She twists things. Always has. Then why are you still letting her set the tone? He didn't answer. I watched his fingers drum the side of the glass. Then, almost like an afterthought, he said, she told me you stole money once, back when you were 19. From her savings. My breath caught. She told you that? He nodded slowly. Said you were supposed to deposit something while she was out of town. Claimed you skimmed a few hundred off the top and acted like it got lost in transit. I sat back. I didn't even have access to that account. She gave me the key to her lockbox for her electric bill. I paid it exactly like she asked. Trevor shrugged. I don't know, that's just what she told us. Us? Me, Rachel, Aunt June, probably. I closed my eyes for a second. The picture was forming and it wasn't just recent. She'd been planting seeds for years. Telling versions of events with just enough detail to seem plausible. And the rest of them. They didn't question it. Because it was easier to believe the one who stayed close, smiled big, and paid the bar tab. I'm not the villain, I said quietly. Trevor didn't look up. I know. It came out soft, small, and somehow, not enough. I stood. Keep the paper, I said. Frame it if you want. But I'm done explaining who I am to people who already decided. He stood too. Maddie, wait. I turned, hand on the door. You want to believe her, I said, because it means you don't have to feel guilty. About the money. About the silence. About being in the room and saying nothing. His shoulders slumped. I don't know what's true anymore. I looked him straight in the eye. That's your job to figure out. I'm done being the villain in a story I didn't write. And I walked out. It had been 3 days since I walked out of Trevor's house. I hadn't heard from him. Not a text. Not a call. Not even a passive-aggressive meme like he used to send when he didn't know how to apologize. And honestly, I wasn't surprised. People like him don't reach out when you make them uncomfortable. They wait for the storm to pass and then act like it never happened. But this time, I wasn't letting the weather clear for them. I sat on my couch, laptop open, the folder labeled Truth Foster Family Account spread out beside me. Connor had offered to make dinner, but I wasn't hungry. My mind was too loud. The cursor blinked in an empty document. Not a Word doc. Not a message. A post draft. I hadn't written anything yet. I just hovered. Every time I thought about what to say, a wave of questions rose behind it. What if they twist it again? What if people think I'm airing dirty laundry? What if this just makes everything worse? I reached for my phone, almost out of habit. I opened Instagram, not even thinking. And there it was. Joylyn had posted a quote white text on a charcoal background. Tell the truth, even if your voice shakes. It's not your job to protect someone else's version of the past. No caption. No tags. Just that. I read it 3 times. Then again, and I swear, it landed in my chest like a quiet answer. As I was closing the app, a message popped up. Amber G. Cousin. Hey Maddie. I know we haven't talked in a while. But I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I should have spoken up at the dinner. I didn't know all that had happened. I believed what I was told. I'm really sorry. I stared at her name for a long time. Amber used to braid my hair when I was little. She gave me her senior prom earrings when I couldn't afford jewelry for my 8th grade dance. She'd been in that room. She'd heard every lie. And now, maybe, something was shifting. I typed a short reply. Thank you for saying that. That's all I had. Connor walked in just then, wiping his hands on a dish towel. You okay? He asked. I looked up. Almost. He sat down across from me, nodding at the laptop. You writing it? I'm thinking about it. He tilted his head. You don't have to, you know. You don't owe anyone a performance. I nodded. I know. But if it helps you breathe easier, if it clears space in your chest again, then maybe it's not for them. I let that settle. Maybe it wasn't for them. Maybe it wasn't even for Joylyn. Or for Amber. Or for the town that never really knew the full picture. Maybe it was for me. So I opened the post editor again. And this time, I started typing. When I was 15, my mom borrowed $60 from me and never gave it back. She said it was for gas. I later found the receipt in the trash she'd spent it at the bingo hall. That was the first time I realized my generosity wasn't sacred in our house. Over the years, I gave more than money. I gave silence. I gave apologies I didn't owe. I gave benefit of the doubt when the evidence said otherwise. I stayed quiet when people called me difficult, when they said I was unstable, when I became the ungrateful one. But now I'm telling the truth. Not to shame, not to spite, but to stop hiding. I stopped there, hands resting on the keyboard. The air in the apartment felt still, like it was holding its breath too. I glanced at the time. 9:14 p.m. A Tuesday. No one would expect a post now. That was probably a good thing. I added one final sentence. If you've ever been rewritten by someone else's version of you know that it's not too late to pick up the pen. Then I hovered over the button. Publish. My finger paused. Just for a second. Then I clicked. It was live. I didn't expect an instant flood of likes. I wasn't waiting for validation. All I felt was something shift inside my chest. Like a door I didn't know was locked, had quietly clicked open. Connor watched me. You did it. How? I nodded, surprised by how calm I felt. Yeah, I did. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I'm proud of you, he said. Not because you spoke up, but because you didn't let them keep the last word. That night, I didn't sleep with racing thoughts. I didn't dream of confrontations or comebacks. I just rested. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel like I was running from a story. I was finally writing my own. The post didn't go viral. It didn't blow up my phone or set the town gossip chain on fire. But it didn't go unnoticed either. By the next morning, I'd received 12 DMs, a dozen shares, and one long email from a woman named Becca who used to work with my mom at the community center. Her message was short but heavy. "I always wondered why you never showed up at the charity drive she claimed you ran. She told us you flaked. I'm sorry, Maddie. I should have asked you directly." Oh, that one hit me harder than I expected. Because that's how it happened, wasn't it? Not with screaming matches or slammed doors, but with little edits to the story. Quiet omissions. Rewritten timelines. Versions of me crafted for convenience. And people just accepted it. Connor read over my shoulder as I closed the message. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." He handed me a coffee and sat across from me, laptop open. "You've got a few people reposting your thread. It's getting traction." I took a sip. "That's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" I paused. "To be ignored." Connor smiled a little. Truth has a strange gravity to it. An hour later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hi, is this Madison Foster?" I froze. "Yes. This is Sharon Daniels. I'm a review coordinator with the State Assistance Office. We received a flag from a third party regarding past aid claims under your name. Would you be willing to come in this week to confirm your status during the years listed?" I sat up straighter. "Yes, of course. We'll send the documents by email. Please bring any materials you have." My fingers tightened around the phone. "I will," I said. "Thank you." When I hung up, Connor looked at me. "What was that?" I exhaled slowly. "State's investigating. Doreen used my name on aid forms. Someone flagged it." "Joylene?" he asked. I nodded. "Maybe. Or someone else saw the post and finally spoke up." It was quiet for a beat. Then he said, "You're not hiding anymore." And for once, I believed it. But not everyone was celebrating. That afternoon, a screenshot landed in my inbox. From Rachel, of course. She'd posted a photo of Doreen sitting in her recliner, holding a mug that said, "Mom of the Year." Caption: "Some folks crave attention more than resolution. Meanwhile, real women keep showing up for their families." And the comments were exactly what I expected. Amen. She deserves better. Shame how people turn their backs on blood. No names. No tags. But the message was clear. I stared at it for a full minute before closing the screen. I didn't feel rage. Not even shock. Just clarity. They needed to double down. Because if my version held up, theirs fell apart. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. I didn't recognize the number. I played it on speaker. "Hi Maddie, it's Mr. Calvin. I'm not sure if you remember me used to live 2 doors down from your mom's place back when you were in high school. I just wanted to say, I saw what you wrote, and I believe you. Always wondered how things really worked behind those curtains. You take care of yourself now." My throat caught. Mr. Calvin had given me my first set of jumper cables. Used to wave every morning on my way to school, like clockwork. Never said much, just paid attention. I saved the voicemail. Didn't text back. Just saved it. Because some words aren't meant to keep a conversation going. They're meant to close a wound. I went to the closet. Pulled out the file box. I didn't open it. Just carried it over to the desk and sat down. Not with dread. With purpose. It wasn't just paperwork anymore. It was armor. As I was closing the lid again, my phone lit up one more time. This time, it was a text. "Doreen. If you want to drag this family through the mud, fine. But don't come crying when you realize how alone that path gets." I didn't reply. Not out of fear. Out of finality. Because I wasn't alone. I had Joylene. Connor. Mr. Calvin. Amber. Even people I didn't know yet who read the truth and recognized their own bruises in it. She'd expected shame to silence me. But I had lived in shame's basement for too long to be afraid of the light. Tomorrow, I'd meet with the state. And soon, I'd see Doreen again. But not as her scapegoat. As her mirror. I parked across the street from her house. Not in the driveway. Not at the curb. Across the street, where I could take a moment and decide if I really wanted to go in. But I already knew I would. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about some dramatic reckoning. It was about not letting the story end where she wanted it to. I reached across the passenger seat and picked up the folder. The same one she'd twisted into a weapon that night at the dinner table. Except this time, it wasn't lined with shame. It was lined with receipts. Statements. Confirmations. Proof. And I wasn't carrying it to defend myself anymore. I was carrying it to end something. I stepped out of the car, adjusted the strap on my shoulder, and crossed the street. The porch looked the same. Peeling paint, the hanging plant half dead. The doormat still read, "Welcome," ish. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, louder. A pause, then footsteps. She opened the door slowly, like she hadn't already been watching through the curtain. Her expression was blank at first. Then, practiced. Like she was preparing for a scene. "Well," she said, crossing her arms. "Didn't expect you." "I know," I said calmly. "But we're going to talk." She hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Kitchen's fine?" I didn't answer. Just followed. The smell hit me before we reached the back room. Mover brewed coffee and air freshener trying to cover up something stale underneath. She gestured toward a chair. I stayed standing. "I won't be long," I said. "I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to yell. I just need you to understand something." She gave me a smile I'd seen my whole life, soft, tilted, perfectly controlled. The one she used in front of church ladies and credit officers. "I've always understood more than you think, Maddie." I set the folder on the table. Her eyes flicked to it. "This," I said, "is the truth. Years of it. Every transfer, every receipt. Every time I covered for someone and let you take the credit. Every lie you told with my name printed on the line." Her jaw tensed. "You don't have to bring all this back up." "I didn't bring it back up. You did. When you called me a leech. When you told people I stole from you. When you filed aid requests under my name." She looked down. That was her first move. Make herself small. Diminished. Frail. "I was trying to keep this family afloat," she said softly. "You have no idea what that pressure felt like." I leaned in slightly. You have no idea. Because I was keeping it afloat, quietly, repeatedly. While you spun a story that painted me as a burden." Her voice sharpened. "So what? You want a parade? You want everyone to line up and say you were right?" "No," I said. "I want you to stop lying. Even if it's just to yourself." There was a beat of silence between us. She looked at the folder again. "You always were good with numbers." "I'm better with boundaries," I said. Another pause. Her eyes flicked to the doorway, like she was calculating whether anyone else was listening. Then she sighed. "You made this ugly when you went public." I shook my head. "You made it ugly when you made me small." That landed. For a second, something flickered in her eyes. Not guilt. Not apology. Recognition. The kind you have when a mask starts slipping and you realize the person standing in front of you isn't a child anymore. I reached for the folder and pulled out one sheet. The pawn slip for the locket I gave her. I set it on the table, no words. Her face didn't move. But her hands twitched slightly. She picked up the slip, stared at it, and then quietly set it back down. "That necklace didn't mean anything to me," she muttered. "I know," I said. And that was the moment I knew I'd finished something. Not one. Finished. I gathered the documents, closed the folder, and slid it to the middle of the table. "I don't need you to admit it. I don't need you to explain it. But I'm not carrying it anymore." Her voice wavered. "So that's it?" "That's it." I turned and walked toward the front door. As my hand reached the knob, she called, other voice lower, almost childlike. Maddie. If this all blows back on me, if the state or if people start asking questions. I looked back at her, calm and clear. You'll have to live in the world you built. That's what I did for 32 years. Her face collapsed just slightly. I stepped out into the sunlight, walked to my car, sat down, closed the door, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I owed her anything. Not an explanation. Not a smile. Not even a goodbye. Just the silence she once used to bury me. Now returned, with clarity. It's strange what silence sounds like when it finally belongs to you. Not the kind that hangs in a tense room. Not the kind you choke on when someone rewrites your story in front of a crowd. But the kind that fills your home after everything's been said. After you've spoken for yourself. After you've stopped needing the last word. That kind of silence feels like space. It had been 5 days since I left Doreen's house. I hadn't heard from her, not directly. But word floated through the grapevine that she'd taken a break from Facebook and was healing privately. No apology. No accountability. Just distance. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need anything more. I stood in my kitchen that morning, watching the sun stretch across the floor. The coffee maker hummed behind me. A quiet Friday. Nothing remarkable. Except me. Still here. Still whole. Still Mina. Connor walked in from the hallway, fresh from his morning shift at the shop. His hands smelled faintly of engine grease and soap. He gave me that look he always does when he sees me thinking too hard, eyebrows raised, mouth soft. You okay? I nodded. Actually, yeah. He kissed my temple and poured a mug. Big plans today? Thinking of cleaning out the office. He paused. The file cabinet? Yeah. He didn't say anything else. Just nodded. An hour later, I was sitting on the floor of my office with half the cabinet emptied around me. Tax folders, client logs, old freelance invoices. And tucked between 2 manila folders. The original one. The black accordion file I'd started years ago, back when keeping track of what I gave made me feel sane. I held it in my lap for a long moment. Then opened it. Inside was the thank you card from Doreen. The one where she called me her safety net. I ran my fingers over the words. For a second, the ache returned. But only for a second. I took a deep breath. Then reached for a new folder from the shelf above me, labeled it, kept for clarity. I didn't shred anything. I didn't throw it away. Some things don't deserve to be erased. They deserve to be seen. Just not lived in. I slid the papers into the new folder. Closed it, filed it in the back of the cabinet. Out of reach, but not out of memory. Later that afternoon, I drove to Joylene's. She was sitting on her porch swing, knitting something with yarn the color of late fall. Told you you'd come out clean, she said, smiling as I stepped onto the porch. Not clean, I said. Just no longer dirty for someone else's mess. She chuckled. Same thing, most days. We didn't talk much. Just sat there for a while. She handed me a folded square of paper before I left. Found this when I was cleaning out old files, she said. Thought you might want it. It was a photo. Me, probably 10 or 11, sitting at the community potluck with a paper plate in my lap and a plastic spoon in my hand. Doreen stood behind me, arms crossed, eyes on someone off camera. But what caught my eye was my own expression. Half smile. Unsteady. Like I was already learning to calculate how much of myself I was allowed to show. I took the photo home. Taped it inside the door of my new file box, not the truth one, not the clarity one. A new one I'd started. Labeled, after. Des. That night, as I got into bed, I felt something settle. Not closure. I don't believe in that word anymore. But an understanding. Some stories don't end with apologies, some wounds don't close with neat stitching. But if you're lucky, and brave, and exhausted enough to stop performing, you get to leave the stage. You get to take your name back. You get to write the rest without asking permission. So no, I didn't get the family toast. I didn't get the big public reconciliation. But I got something better. I got peace in the small hours. I got the strength to walk away holding only what was mine. And I got to wake up the next day knowing what I took with me was the truth. And that was more than enough.